I'm going to cover this northwest portion of your property that's 54 acres up here, and we're going to cover how topography affects how deer use the property. And the main things we're dealing with are swirling winds and thermals. And when you have a lot of topography, like you have on this property, those mature deer know how to use that to their advantage. They know how to see us coming, hear us coming, smell us coming. They also use it to a thermal scent check food plots and in their quest for does. So let's start with how topography dictates where deer likes to bed. All things being equal, topography will dictate where a deer likes to bed. Now obviously, all things aren't equal on your property because you have this clear cut here, which is a major draw for the deer. There's no two ways about it. It's a place for them to feed. It can become a place for them to sleep. So let's talk about where deer like to bed with different winds and how that affects us. So if the wind is out of the west, what the deer like to do is they want to set up on the leeward side of these hills, right? Leeward side. And the reason for that, they come over the top of this hill. They come down the leeward side if they can find a flat bench, which might not exist here, or this might be a small bench right here. They find that flat bench with some back cover and some side cover, and that's where they're going to set up shop. And the reason they do that is they can smell and hear everything back here that can't see them. And they also set up so they have a view of the bottom down here. So if danger comes from the bottom where they can't smell, they can see it. They disappear over the backside. If danger comes from this side where they can see it, or if danger comes from back here where they can't see or see back there, they can use their nose and their ears to tell what's going on back there. So when we want to hunt with our face into the wind or downwind where we think the deer are, it creates problems for us. So we've got a four-wheeler trail here. Let's say this is a bench situation where those deer like to set up in bed with a west wind. So we're thinking, okay, west wind, we're going to come into our spot. We're going to walk up on the edge of this clear cut here. We're going to catch these deer cruising this edge, whatever it might be. When we think we're working with the wind, the deer are really working with the wind too. So if those deer are bedded right here on this bench, that means they see us coming from this far away. They simply walk over the edge through the clear cut and they're gone. And that bedding type scenario will repeat itself all over your property. Now, while I can't see any major benches on your property right here, I'm sure they exist somewhere. Again, northwest wind on this knob. They want to disappear over this side onto this bench, see what's below for danger, smell what's back here. Now, if the wind's out of the east, conversely, they're going to flip sides. Wind's out of the east, come over the top, come down here to a bench, see what's down here, smell what's down here. So you can see it makes it very difficult for us because we're trying to defeat their nose, they're using their eyes to get us. So that's very hard. So that's how that preferred topographic bedding can set up. And we have to keep that in mind as we plan out our axis for different winds. A lot of times it puts us in a scenario where we're forced to hunt a crosswind to be able to make something work. And that's always implemented into these plans with a lot of topography. Now let's talk about, how the deer use the thermals. So anytime that the ground is warmer than the air, the thermals go uphill. And anytime the ground is cooler than the air, the thermals go downhill. It varies greatly with degree of the hill, how many feet of elevation we're talking about, and how much sunlight is hitting the ground. But know that the deer use it. One especially painful way deer can often use it is up on tops of these areas where typically it's easier to put a clear cut. We got a little flatter land, nicer places for a food plot, and really the only place that we can catch a consistent wind that's not swirling are up in these tops. So that's where we put a lot of our food when we hunt. Now what happens, let's look at where you got food marked over here. Zoom in a little bit. Looks like we got a food plot over here. Okay? When we have a food plot here, our deer know that by using the thermals, if they approach from over here, which is 909 feet, the plot's at 933, and over here is 907. So if they stage down here, lower than the plot, or they stage back here, lower than the plot, they can take advantage of the prevailing winds and the thermals. When that sun hits the horizon, about 45 minutes before dark, the winds will start to change and swirl a little bit because the thermals are getting confused on what to do. That last 15 minutes of daylight or 15 minutes of hunting light when the sun is down, now our thermals are going downhill. If we're sitting in a tree up here, those deer don't have to come into the food plot to see what's going on. Even if we had a straight north wind that wasn't very strong. When the thermals get powerful and they grab our scent and pull it downhill into this bottom, We never see those deer. They might not blow at us. They're just going to take off and leave. Same thing over here. The thermals can suck our wind down there. So those deer will consciously use those thermals to jump in those thermal sinks to, with their nose, visit what's up in that food plot. They know which does are up there. They know if there's a coyote up there. And they know if we're sitting in that thermal sink that we're sitting up there, and they simply won't come. So if you're getting a lot of daylight photos of your deer up here, and you're not getting a lot of daylight activity when you're hunting there, there's a really good chance the deer are taking advantage of those thermals. Now, if we could bed those deer here for some reason, if we had a way we could do that, bed them on this little side of this hill or something like that, now they don't have the big play on thermals to come in. But know that the mature deer often will consciously use these areas as thermal sinks to figure out if we're in that food plot or not. We got to work around that. There's ways to do it, but it's tough to do. Another very important thing with any time we have these ridge systems is how the bucks can cruise it during the rut. So if I take, I'm going to put in a line tool. If I take the top of this clear cut here, or top of this ridge, I mean, you can see it runs for a long ways, okay? Now what the bucks are able to do is that, say the wind is out of the west again, comes over the top of this hill, swirls on this side, right? The thermals during the day are carrying the scent from the bottoms uphill. So a buck is able to walk this leeward side of this ridge. The swirling winds coming over the top, that swirl, he can smell everything on this side of the ridge without being able to even see over there. He can smell those deer, all of them. The thermals are taking the scent of these bedded deer up to him. So by cruising that thermal line correctly, by cruising that line correctly on the leeward side of that ridge, he's able to scent check both sides of that hill. So keep that in mind if you know where we have does bedded, that if you can find a spot on the leeward side of that hill with the different winds, you'll know where that buck's going to cruise on his feet during the rut, and that's a very important feature also. And again, where the deer bed, how they use the thermal sinks, how they use the thermals to detect danger, how they realize that thermals blow uphill when the ground is warmer, and downhill when the ground is cooler is going to dictate how they use this land, and it makes it very difficult on us. So things to be very cognizant of. This topography is the number one consideration for your property, and figuring out how the animals like to use it, designing around that, and then hunting around that is going to be the keys to your success. So if you need more help, give Sean a call. He can get you set up with a plan where we dive into this in more detail. Remember that this topography typically means that there's a lot of big deer in the area because they are more difficult to hunt. So it's a curse and a blessing. It's a curse because the deer really know how to use it to their advantage. It's a blessing because we know the big deer exist in systems like that because they're taking advantage of that topography.